Hi, and welcome to the third tutorial in the tutorial series Python Basics. In this tutorial, we're going to go over three things right off the start: data types, the type function, and a neat little trick that you can use in the interactive session called the up arrow. So when I've got an interactive session going like I have here, if I hit the up arrow, it's going to just automatically populate the screen with the last thing I typed. So I'm going to go over these three commands that I showed here just to show you. So the first one I did was I wrote a equals none with a capital N. None is our first data type we're going to go over because we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. The none type is a type in Python. Python accepts this command. If I type a, it shows me the value of a, which is nothing. And if I use the function called type, T-Y-P-E, with the parentheses, I can just type up arrow to get back to that. So T-Y-P-E, parentheses a, it's going to tell me what the data type is for the value of a. And in this case, it's a none type. So this is it literally is just a null value type, and I'm sure it's useful, but I don't use it a lot, so I'm going to move on. The next data type that you'll come across a lot in Python is the bool or boolean type. So we can, one nice thing about Python, which you may or may not know, is that you can redefine variables on the fly. A lot of other codes will have you declare a variable type, and if you want to make it redeclare it, you have to redeclare it, and you would never do that in another code. So in Python, you have a lot of flexibility and freedom, which I think a lot of people like, me for one. In this case, I'm going to redefine a now as the value true with a capital T. Python accepts that. I'm going to define the value b as false with a capital F. Python accepts that value. If I enter a and if I hit enter now in the interactive session, Python's going to print to the screen the value of a. It's just returning that value. If I want it to actually return the value in a program, I have to type print, and again, that's another function which we've perhaps seen before, but in this case, it does the exact same thing. If I hit type for a, and now it says it's a class bool for boolean. Okay. Another thing that Python will return boolean values for are logic. So if you put in a logical statement, Python will return a boolean value. In this case, I'm going to put in a very simple one, and I'm going to use the comparator, the double equal sign, which means compare and test equality. So if I say 1 double equals 1, I'm saying compare these numbers. Are they equal? And Python says it's true, they're equal. If I now do this for something which I know is false, Python tells me it's false. So this is great. Now, if we want to move on, we can move on to another type of values called strings. One thing about Python and all this redefining is that you can get yourself in trouble. And I'm going to show you one way that I've gotten myself in trouble in the past. I could define a as a string value that looks a lot like this Boolean value. So a is now true, but it's in quotations. So if I want to compare now, if I say is a equal to true, I get a value false. Well, how can that be, right? Well, the reason is because the type of a is now a string. It's not Boolean. And so it's not true that a equals a Boolean value true. It's true that a equals the string value true, yeah, with a capital T. So if I look at the type, sorry, for the b, the type of the b is still a Boolean value. And so you can get yourself in a lot of trouble, but you have a lot of power and flexibility with the ability to redefine variables on the fly. So now we've looked at these types, we can do other things with strings. Strings don't have to just be regular characters. You can have all sorts of characters: numbers, spaces, quotes, single quotes. And one of the things that the string type accepts is that you can either you can contain your string in either double quotations on either side or single quotations. So I could have a string where I say string 1, and I'll start it with a double quote, but then I'll want to put a single quote in there and say hello. said the boy to the machine. End with a double quote. Python accepts that. I could define a second string, string2 equals, and I'll start that with a single quote, and I'll say, hello, said the machine to the boy, and end it with a single quote. Python accepts that. And so if I ask now Python to print string1, it prints it with no quotations on the outside, but it does show the single quote that I wrote in for the hello said the boy, in single quotes. If I do the same, I can use the up arrow and just change this to string2, and it prints hello said the machine to the boy using the double quotes. There's another way to, if you need both quotes in your string for some reason, Python can handle that. You have to use something called an escape character or a slash, and so it's a, I guess it's a backslash, but I can say string, or let's call it quotes. I don't know, man. Quote string equals, and I'll put in parentheses. I'll put slash quote slash double quote. End it with a double quote. It looks really confusing, right? So if I ask Python to print it, print quote string, it prints a single quote and a double quote. Again, this is just a very special case. You probably would never need to do something silly like that, but sometimes those silly things come up where you want to have a quote inside your string and you have to figure out how to do it. So it's this backslash character. That's called the escape character. That's how you're able to define those inside of a quote or inside of a string. Let's move on to integers and floats. Again, in a lot of programs, you have to define right up front, is this going to be an integer? Is this going to be a float? And there's even multiple classes of integers and floats. In Python, it automatically detects what you've used, and if it needs to change, it seems to change it on the fly. So in this case, if I say that A, I'm going to redefine now as 101, and I ask what type is A, it's going to tell me it's a class integer. If I define B equaling 100.0, and I ask what type that is, it's going to say that B is a float. Again, in other programming languages, if I try to mix integers and floats, I'll get problems. In Python 3, if I say what's A divided by B, and I ask Python to return that, it just tells me the answer, 1.01. And it automatically converted A into a float for this computation that it did. Similarly, if I define a new value, C equals 25, and I ask for the type of C, it's going to say that C is an integer. But if I try to divide A by C, it's just going to automatically convert both of them into floats and give me the correct answer. You can tell Python that you want an integer answer. So I can say int A over C. And in that case, it says, okay, I'll convert that to an integer. In this case, it converts it to 4. But you have to be careful because in Python, integer conversion from a float, you lose precision, and it's not going to round it in the way that you would normally round in math, where you might go up if it's above 5, you might go down if it's below 0.5, etc. In this case, if I typed int 1.9999, you might have a good guess as what that's going to be, but you might be wrong because it's going to tell you it's 1. So in this case, it's doing something called floor rounding, or and I can show you that just really quickly. That there's a function embedded in Python that you can, or there's a module you can import called math. Okay, and it has two things. I think there's one called ceiling and one called floor. So if I said math.ceil 1.999, then it rounds it up to 2. If I say math.floor 1.999, it rounds it down to 1. And so this math.floor function is an equivalent to what just normally, like defining a floating point number as an integer does in Python. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Hopefully you're now familiar with the Python data types and the type function and using the up arrow to recall things in your interactive session. I will see you in the next tutorial.